Hi guys, welcome back to the Shannon Show. So today's video is going to be a review of the film Harriet. Now I actually I watched this film at the press screening in the London BFI Film Festival. I got there early in the morning. I had to wake up early in the morning for this film. They had so many screenings like at 8 a.m. in the morning. So I had to wake up at 6 a.m. to watch this film. But yeah, so obviously it's another slave film. You know, a lot of people, especially people of black ancestry, usually, there's a lot of debate within the kind of black community of, whether we should be supporting slave films. Like, we want to see different type of films. We want to see happy films. We want to see films that aren't kind of centered around trauma and race all the time. And, I've watched slave films. Like, I've watched 12 Years a Slave. I've watched The Django. I thought they were good films. But as I'm getting older, I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, like, it's getting a bit ridiculous that our most acclaimed films are slave films. So yeah, it would be fun to have, something a bit more. Doesn't have to necessarily be joyful, but something a bit more diverse. So like a detective film or something like that, or like a coming of age film that is not kind of like trauma based. Some diversity. But as a film critic, I wasn't going to rule it out. Obviously, press screening. It was a press screening, so I just thought, you know what? Let me go see. Like, maybe it's a different type of story, because obviously Harriet is actually like a heroine. So I thought maybe this would be different. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy, not because of it being a slave film, but because of the actress that plays Harriet, Cynthia Erivo. Correct me if I pronounced her surname wrong, but Miss Cynthia has said some controversial and derogatory, and has made derogatory comments towards kind of African Americans, which she is portraying. So there's been a lot of debate on whether African Americans should debate the film, whether African Americans should support or boycott the film. But I'll get into that later. But in terms of, if you are black, do you enjoy slave films? Do you feel like it's time for a change? Do you think it's a tired genre? Or do you feel like these are stories that need to be told? It's our history, we should be able to tell. We should be able to say it. Or, another argument is that a lot of the time it is majority white production houses that commission slave stories. How do we feel about that? Do we feel like it doesn't really matter who the production houses are, and that we should still be able to tell these stories and tell our history? Or would it make a difference if it was a black production house? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So yeah, obviously most of us know the story of Harriet, and that's what the film was. Basically, it was a biopic. If you don't know the story of Harriet, I suggest you read up on it. So I'm not really classifying this as a spoiler review. In terms of people who haven't watched it, the brutality, it's not very brutal. Like, you don't see anyone getting whipped or anything. You don't see anyone getting raped. So you don't see anyone get sexually assaulted. So there's none of that. The N-word, yeah, there's the N-word in there. Drops in the first 10 minutes. Honestly, some people say the N-word doesn't need to be mentioned. Like, you could still do a film that's based on race and racial discrimination without saying the N-word. Both of the screenplay writers are black. For me personally, I just feel like if you're writing stories in the past, like, people were out here saying it. People were just out here saying it willy-nilly. I feel like some people, obviously there's been debate with Tarantino and how he always says it in his films. I think definitely he does it to be provocative, provocative rather than historical. But I just feel like if it's done, I guess I was gonna say tasteful, but is there really? And obviously in popular culture, I feel like in popular culture and hip hop that's different. But you know, the ER. I personally, if it's in historical set in the the slave trade period, I don't really particularly see a problem with it. But you know, I do laugh when they say it, because usually it's with a lot of vim, and in this movie they say it with a lot of vim. It's very typical southern, you know, southern ER, you know, very dramatic. That's all I'll say. But yeah, but let me know. Do you feel like they should say it in films or not? But yeah, they say it in the film. In terms of the acting, in terms of the storyline, so let's just say the storyline. Some people say, you know, they didn't really like the storyline. I heard some people say something about like there's a white savior element in the film. They've added in a bounty hunter. Like, what the hell? What I would say is, in terms of the writing and the direction of the film, it was quite gloomy. It was quite sad. It was quite gloomy. I personally thought they were going to go... the reason why I wanted to give the film a chance was because I thought that they were going to go down the kind of action route. Because obviously, Harriet, she was a bad bitch. Like, she was doing shit. Like, I already broke my steering wheel. But yeah, she was a bad bitch. Like, she was out here evading captures. She was out here, you know, bringing people to freedom, like Nicki Minaj said, you know? So I wasn't expecting like a Marvel superhero stuff, but I was expecting some slick superhero bad bitch shit. And we didn't really get that. We kind of got like a scared young woman, kind of reeking of, you know, there's elements of kind of desperation, which obviously they were in a desperate situation. But, you know, she didn't really come across as a bad bitch. She kind of came across as, you know, she's desperate to seek freedom, and, you know, she's very scared, but she's just, you know, letting God guide her. And, you know, she's very adamant. She's determined to get people to freedom, but at the same time, there is this kind of uncertainty and nervousness about her, which I didn't really like. I would have thought that Harriet was a lot more confident and a lot more firm and a lot more of a bad bitch than what she was portrayed as. But for those of you who watched it, what did you kind of think of kind of the storyline and the portrayal? Obviously, there were some things that they kind of mixed around. Obviously, she had a husband, and he was a free man, and obviously how it worked back in those days is that the status of the child was dependent on the mother. So obviously Harriet was still enslaved, so any child they had was going to be enslaved because Harriet was enslaved. Obviously when she went off, I guess he kind of thought she wasn't coming back, and he married somebody else, and they were going to have children and whatever. But, you know, Harriet finds out about it, and she was going to confront him, but she ends up not. In real life, she doesn't confront him. She's just like, you know what, fuck that bitch, like, fuck him, innit? I was going to ride down here. I came all the way back for you, and this is how you repay me. You know, you couldn't even wait a year. So it's just kind of just like, you know, you thought I was dead, but you couldn't even let me be dead for a year before you go boning some new chick. So, you know what? Fuck you, innit? And she didn't actually confront him in real life, but in the movie she did. What else? Also, they have this thing where she's running away from her former master, and instead of killing him, she gives him like a what's it called? I don't know what kind of wound it is. There's wounds where it's a wound, but it will heal. She gives him, is it a mortal wound? I think that's what they call it, a mortal wound, and she lets him go. Like, she doesn't kill him. And I guess that's what people were kind of talking about when they said the white savior thing. Like, that didn't really happen in real life, and honestly I was confused as to why they did that, because obviously he's hell-bent on enslaving people, and he's, not even her, but obviously she was just an object to him, but he was hell-bent in keeping people enslaved, and he was the one who owned all the other slaves back there. So if Harriet, who had a gun, she was ready to use it. If she was really if we're believing she's who she says she is, who is somebody who is down to kill for the liberation of black people, I think she would have killed him. I don't think she would have spared his life. After she spent all of this time trying to free everyone from his plantation, why would she keep him alive? I just don't know. Yeah, sorry, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert here. Spoiler alert. Why would she keep him alive? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really make any sense. So yeah, that was kind of a spoiler there. But yeah, I'll put a little thing. It doesn't really make any sense. It didn't make any sense to me. What did you think about that scene? For those of you who had seen it, what did you think about that scene? So let's get into the other characters. The bounty hunter that people were talking about. That was an interesting choice. Because on the common argument is the people in Africa are the ones who sold the African Americans off. But, different angle here. Now there is an African American who is working with the white people who are pro-slavery to recapture his skinfolk into slavery. So I guess, I don't know what they were trying to do there. I don't know if that was like kind of like a flip side argument. A lot of people weren't really here for it, but at the end of the day it happened. There were black bounty hunters who were working for it, and then I guess there were black bounty hunters out here who were out here dogging out their people, dogging out their skinfolk. So I thought that was quite interesting. But the violence, I'm not sure, but what I didn't really like was the violence. I feel like that was a bit unnecessary. Obviously, the scene with Janelle Monáe, who was a free woman who was helping the slaves. Obviously, this is after the Fugitive Act passed, and they had an encounter, and it was quite violent. I wasn't a fan of that. I wasn't really a fan of that. But then on the flip side, I wasn't really a fan of that, but let me know what you kind of thought of that kind of whole incident. But there was also a flip side. There was one bounty hunter who decided to actually team up with Harriet. That definitely didn't happen in real life, but I guess maybe they're trying to show two sides of the same coin. I just kind of thought, like, we're going to have a bad bounty hunter, black bounty hunter, and then we're going to have, we're going to make it not seem so bad by having a good one. I don't know. What do you guys think of the inclusion of the bounty hunters? Acting. I think Cynthia did a good job with the material done. Obviously, I personally don't agree with the portrayal of Harriet as kind of like a scared little girl. As kind of like a scared young woman. I feel like she was definitely a bad bitch. I definitely think she had a stronger interior than what was portrayed. But personally, with the material given, I think that she did a good job. I think she's actually, in terms of if we're judging solely on her acting ability, I think she did a good job. In terms of Janelle Monáe, again, a solid performance. She did what she did with the material, but I didn't like the portrayal of the slave owners. I feel like it was just very dramatic, like a caricature of the southern racist white people, and I just think it was a bit too theatrical. I didn't really like it. Yeah, what did you think of the portrayal of the slave owners? Let me know. I personally thought it was a bit too theatrical. And what else? I personally thought what do you call it? I personally thought it was just a bit too theatrical. I thought it was a bit too theatrical for my liking. I thought it was just a bit too overboard. And yeah, it's just like, you know, it's just like the stereotypical theatrical racist white person, like, these Negroes, they're doing too much. These niggers, we need to do this to them. This, that. And it's just like, come with something new. Come with something new, baby. I'm bored, I'm tired. So yeah, everything else, like, what I would say, like, cinematography was really good. It was like very like romantic-y. It was very like kind of like romanticized. It's very like a romantic soft lighting, very resonance kind of cinematography, which I liked. I thought that the scene, I feel like the cinematography was very beautiful. And also, yeah, I just feel like the storyline was a lot more romanticized, really. Obviously, we see her leading an army in the Civil War. And then after that, that's kind of like the last scene. We don't really see her in later life. We don't see her get a new man. And obviously, I saw some people on Twitter saying they didn't show that she had a younger husband, but that's not the ending that they wanted you to have. Something along those lines. But, you know, I read up on her biography today, and honestly, I don't really think that she really had a great or fulfilling life after slavery was abolished and after the American Civil Rights, because she spent like her whole life helping everyone else. Like, she literally had no money because she spent it helping somebody else. Like, she didn't really get to enjoy the legacy that she left behind. So I'm not sure if she really had a happy ending, but yeah, it's not like she died like a miserable old woman, you know? She didn't die that way. She died loved, but she really did like dedicate her whole life. She never really got to enjoy her life. I don't personally believe from the material that I have seen. But yeah, so moving on, the debate with the whole Cynthia diabolical. So obviously Cynthia has said like a few derogatory comments on African Americans, and I feel like in America there is like a division between first gen Africans and African Americans. African Americans are descendants are Africans who are direct descendants from slavery, whereas first gen Africans are basically immigrants within like the last 10 or 20 years. From them, you know, obviously there is a division there. So, you know, Cynthia, she's and on top of that, she's English, so she's not even she didn't even grow up in America, and she's first gen African. She's first gen Nigerian. So even though her parents or her grandparents were born in Nigeria. You know, some people have kind of called her out for being Harriet, and like people feel like she has taken the role of somebody who is African American, and you know, we've seen that a lot with the guy from Get Out, Daniel, with the lead from Get Out. A lot of, you know, Samuel Jackson has come out and said, you know, Black British people are taking up African American jobs in terms of the acting. she's come out and defended herself. She said, African Americans got to play Black Panther. So yeah, we should be able to, we should be able to play you guys if you can play us. But there was a lot of like derogatory undertones. Let me just look up what she actually said. So basically, Cynthia had made some comments. There was one comment where she basically said brackets. And she basically said brackets, ghetto American accent. She didn't say black, but we all know ghetto American accent. We can all assume she's talking about an African American accent, and then said something along the lines of, baby girl, this, that, and this and that. So like, African American vernacular in typing. So basically mocking African American vernacular and calling it ghetto. And then there's also basically saying, she basically defended her casting and basically said that she should be able to play Harriet Tubman because she's African, and that's that. And, I'm first gen African as well, first gen Congolese. And I can understand why she might feel entitled to play Harriet Tubman because, Harriet Tubman is African Americans are direct descendants from Harriet Tubman, but so are first gen Africans. Obviously, Nigeria, Ghana, those were the main ports where the slave trade happened, where slaves, where African people were enslaved and taken to America. Those were kind of the hotspots of the ports, Nigeria and Ghana. So perhaps, there could be a valid argument there that, she is as much as a direct ancestor to Harriet Tubman than African Americans. She could argue that, and I could see that argument, but at the same time, in terms of living through, I believe in like Pan-Africanism, so I believe everybody who is black is African, but I also respect people who have their own things, so Caribbeans or African Americans who've created their own cultures and their own identities outside of Africa. Harriet Tubman's experience, even though she's an African descent, is an African American experience. Just like, if there was a biopic about the Prime Minister of the uprising in Congo, it would be, even though all black people are African, it would be a Congolese experience. And same with if there was something that happened, an event that happened in Nigeria, that would be a Nigerian experience. So I can understand why not only people would say, well, it's an African American experience, it should be told by and played by an African American person, but then on top of that, she's made some cheeky comments. And, I understand there's some animosity there. There's often back and forth, but I feel like, even regardless of who had said whatever first, it's cheeky to then go and play African American role after you have made some derogatory comments because of them. I'm not entirely against it personally. If I was casting Harriet Tubman, I would specifically choose African American. I'm not against people of African descent, of like first generation Africans playing African Americans. If I was to cast against playing African Americans, but I feel like I probably wouldn't have them as a main character. If I was going to make a show with Black Americans and I was going to have a first gen African, then they would play a first gen African. Like, I wouldn't make them an African American, if that makes sense. In terms of how I feel about African Americans playing African roles, like as in Black Panther, obviously I personally would have liked to see more Africans, first gen Africans in there, or direct African immigrants. But I liked Black Panther, I enjoyed it, and the director and the cast hadn't made any derogatory comments towards first gens or Africans. So, I liked the film. It wasn't a deal breaker for me. Like, I wasn't going to go protest. It was just like, it is what it is. They're the ones with the money. They're the stars. They're the ones with the pull. But yeah, how do you feel about Cynthia playing this role? Do you feel like African American roles should strictly be for African Americans? or do you just have the problem that she said derogatory things? And if you are first gen African, what do you think? Do you feel like first gen Africans should be allowed to play African Americans? Let me know what you think.
Freeze frame. I totally forgot to record my rating part for the video, so I'm just going to put it in here. Basically, overall, I kind of felt like it was an average film. For me now, I think I have high expectations for historical slave era films now, and I just feel like it was quite average. I feel like they tried to have an inspirational tone, but in terms of her performance, it didn't really inspire me. It didn't inspire me as much as reading Harriet Tubman's Wikipedia page. So I feel like it kind of felt short there. I'm not sure if it was the direction or the writing or a mixture of both. I can't really fault the performances. I think they were just working with the material made for them. I doubt it's going to win any Oscars. I doubt Cynthia's going to get an Oscar nomination for her performance. If she does, I'd be very surprised. In terms of what the film could be nominated for, I'd say probably maybe cinematography or costume, because they were both good. But I doubt there'll be any directing, acting gongs for them. So overall, I'm not sure. I'm leaning between a 2.5 and a 3. But I think I'm leaning towards a 2.5 because I personally wouldn't recommend... any... I feel like this... Yeah. I'm not saying that I wouldn't recommend you to go see it, but I just feel like in terms of trauma films, I'm not really sure if the story is... But the portrayal, the way that they've told Harriet Tubman's story, I'm not sure if it's worth actually going to the cinema and watching it. I'd probably recommend maybe waiting for it to come out on digital release on TV or something. I just don't think it's that amazing for people to put their money to go and watch, especially for the Black community. I just feel like for slave films now, they have to just... For me now, it have to be an amazing film for me to go watch it, or at least an intriguing story. I need something else, and I feel like there's just a lot of romanticized... It was just a very romanticized version of Harriet Tubman rather than the real. So, yeah, that's my rating, 2.5 out of 5.
So yeah, that's pretty much my review. Let me know what your thoughts were on the film, if you have any opinions on the whole Cynthia situation. I'm currently on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Until next time, guys, bye!